The June 1.60 update is upon us, and while the general sentiment around the community is that of disappointment, the best thing we can do is to take these new additions to the game and try to make them as fast as possible and make them drive as well as possible, which is a small consolation for what is otherwise a underwhelming update. Today we're going to be covering all 3 cars that have been added. I'm going to be giving my thoughts on what these cars are the most useful for, and of course providing optimal setups so that you can get a leg up on the competition. So without further ado, let's get into it, guys. One thing I want to say before I get into the first car is if you guys do enjoy this video and or find these setups useful, leaving a like, comment, and subscribing really helps me out a lot. I'm on the road to 10,000 subscribers and I hope to get there by the end of the year, so I would really appreciate it. So the first car I'm going to be looking at today is the Citroen BX 19 TRS. I've always had a soft spot for these sporty, light European FF cars. Now I'd be lying to you if I told you I had heard of the Citroen BX before this update, and my first impression upon driving it in the weekly challenge race was that of disappointment, and I was thoroughly convinced that it was the worst driving car out of the 3 in this update. With that being said, the more time that I spent with it and the more time I worked on the setup, I realized that this car was bottoming out at the front and the rear from running the ride heights too low. I ended up moving the ride heights up and then working with the rest of the setup to try to get the absolute best possible performance from it. I bled off quite a bit of rear downforce. Usually on FF cars you could run a very forward biased downforce setup, as the cars tend to be very front heavy, and having that extra aero in the front really helps the car rotate on entry and doesn't provide any negatives in the traction department like it would on a rear wheel drive car. A lot of the FF cars got destroyed after the 1.31 physics update, but this is one of the better ones that I've tried. The car is unbelievably light at 1,885 pounds. With that being said, I will say you definitely don't want to drive this car beyond 95%. If you end up pushing the car to the absolute limit or beyond it, you will overwhelm the front tires and go slower. I think that's attributed mostly to its 62-38 weight distribution, but if you consider this car was made in the mid-80s, it honestly drives really well. It reminds me a lot of the EK Civic, which is a car that came out way later on. So despite being disappointed at first, I will say I've warmed up to this car quite a bit, and it's pretty solid, honestly. Only 3 things in life are certain: death, taxes, and Polyphony Digital adding a SUV or van in one of their updates. And while I wasn't thrilled to see this car when it was revealed, I will say now that I've driven it, it does feel extremely nice to drive. That characteristic that the Citroen had where you have to drive it under its limit to make sure that you're not sliding the front tires, this car just feels like it has claws coming out of the corners. Despite looking very bulbous, it actually is an extremely light vehicle at 2,154 pounds, and the center of gravity being higher up really doesn't affect this car all that much in the corners. It feels like one of the most hunkered down FF cars in the game, but how the car feels is one thing and how it actually performs lap time wise is another. Now keep in mind that this thing does only have 245 horsepower. For some reason the SUVs that they've added in this game, you can never really upgrade the horsepower all that much, and despite the Peugeot 208 as equipped having 621 performance points, the lap time potential really isn't all that impressive. The aforementioned Citroen had 34 more performance points than the Peugeot, which you would expect it to be faster, but at trial mount, it's almost a 5-second a lap difference between the Citroen and the Peugeot, which means in a more competitive setting, I would say the Peugeot is not really the most useful vehicle in this game. With that being said, I think the way it drives honestly makes up for a lot of that. I just wish it had a little bit more horsepower. I know FF cars are naturally well suited to having a ridiculous amount of power, but I feel like this one could definitely use quite a bit more. But overall, it's a solid vehicle. It's a car that really generates no hype when it comes to these updates, but at least it's decent to drive. And of course, saving the best for last, we have the Lancia Delta HF Integrale rally car, the 1992 version that raced in Group A. Now that's an important distinction to make, because when comparing this older rally car to maybe something like the Audi Quattro or the Peugeot 205, those cars are much lighter. In the case of the Peugeot, it's a hatchback that's mid-engine, so the weight distribution is different. I'm going to be giving you guys a Tarmac setup for this car. Now it can be adapted slightly to work on rally. With that being said, I'm going to be honest, I don't drive rally enough to give you guys a good enough reference on what you should do exactly with the setup or how this compares to the other rally cars on dirt. But on Tarmac, this car is awesome. It definitely has a bit of an oversteery tendency for maybe a more new player. With that being said, the balance feels really good with this setup. The speed is definitely there. It's only a tiny bit off of the Peugeot 205's best lap, despite weighing almost 400 pounds more. And unlike the 205, when the tires start to wear on this car, it doesn't become diabolical and undrivable. well. So overall, I would say it's the better option. It also blows most of the modern rally cars out of the water as well on tarmac. Those cars have a little bit more drag down the straights and they're a bit heavier than the older rally cars. Now the Audi Quattro is in a league of its own still. It's definitely a lot faster than everything in the Group B class, at least when it's fully maxed out. But looking outside of the Group B sphere, this car is a sub 740 performance points car and it absolutely flies. It's doing 145s, almost 144s at Trowel Mountain, which it puts it in the ballpark with some of the best 750 pp road cars in the game. And because it has that rally car engine, it's also going to be amazing on fuel. I can't say enough nice things about this car. This car definitely saved the update in my opinion, and I think most people would agree with that sentiment for the most part. Generally speaking, this update is a little bit disappointing. I'm hoping Polyphony Digital is giving us all of these boring update cars because they're stockpiling some of the more cool cars for Gran Turismo 8. Maybe that's wishful thinking or cope, but for the time being, I guess we gotta make do with what we have. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Once again, if you do find these setups useful or enjoy the video, leaving a like, comment, and subscribing really helps me out a lot. Without dragging this video on too long, I hope you guys have a great night. It's been your boy Dude, and I'm out. Peace.